I would always be stuck on, well, I just have a bad relationship with food, when in reality, it's actually something in your everyday life that's happening to push you towards food, if that makes sense. So I think for me, it was one, realizing that that was even stemming from me not having like a safe surrounding or what would you call it, environment, just because I was placing myself around the wrong people. I was making just choices that were probably not the best or the smartest. And so I kept feeling, what's the word, like bad for myself, and like almost being a victim in every situation. And I think once you combine all those factors, it just makes you feel worse about yourself. Like you don't like yourself, you don't like your choices, and you just start developing bad relationships or bad habits in a bad relationship with food or just things in your everyday life. But going back to that, admitting it, realizing that it was a thing, and knowing how to go around it or heal, and we've talked about this over the years, is how we have continued to heal our relationship with food. But I think it's a huge factor because we have continued to heal within ourselves. So I really think that was like a huge factor to why we continue to heal the way we do. But if that answered your question.
Yeah, that brings it exactly into what I want to go into next, which is, if step one is recognizing you're even in survival mode, now how do you begin healing it and getting out of survival mode? So the next step, once you realize that you're actually in survival mode, is you need to realize what is triggering that survival mode, whether it's the financial aspect of it, the feeling safe, or any other factors of why you might be in survival mode. And again, a lot of it is subconscious. So you really need to question yourself and ask yourself those difficult questions to get to the root of what type of survival mode is being triggered. Because once you identify which type it is that's causing you to do that, then you can go in and do that trauma work, which is important that you need to identify that, because you can't approach it the same way. So for example, the way that I healed my trauma is not going to be the same way that you go through your survival trauma to heal it, because it's not the same reasons. And a lot of it has to do with your family too, whether you realize it or not. Because in my situation, it was that financial pressure where I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from. I knew that I was willing to work hard and I would be okay, but at the same time, not knowing where my meals were going to come from was very stressful. And then when I got to Mexico, I was more than provided for. I'm so grateful that I've had the mindset to start attracting the things that I want, and also a family that is very supportive and loving. Because when I got to Mexico, my family would all feed me. So I never had a meal that I wasn't eating or whatever. And then I was living with my dad too, so I didn't have to worry about rent or anything. And then just things started lining up where I did have a job that I was able to do all the way from Mexico. I really didn't have any needs. So it was really going into the subconscious thing of it and working through it to unpack it, to get out of that survival mode. Because, and this is probably something controversial, but sometimes it's yourself putting you in survival mode, not your circumstances. It's you that's putting yourself in survival mode. And so my family too, getting to know like my uncles and cousins and how my family lived in Mexico, and seeing that the poverty mindset goes back so many generations. It's something so unconscious that's been ingrained in us, that's basically in our DNA, that we have to go in and unpack and work through. And so for me, the way that I was able to get out of that survival mode after realizing what it was is working through trusting that God would provide for me, that I would be okay, and reassuring myself, and basically just working through that whole trust process. Because when you're trusting that you're taken care of, that you'll always be okay, it's a slow process where your trust just grows the more you use it. So like first day, okay, I'm gonna trust that this is gonna work out for me. And then it works out for you, and then you have more credibility. Okay, it's gonna keep working out for me. And things may come your way, but how you react to it also is very important with growing that trust muscle to get you out of the survival mode. And pretty soon, you look back at all those days that God really did take care of you and that you never were alone. And that just creates such a big trust. And especially when you're doing the meditative work of going in and actually listening to your inner child and comforting yourself to get out of that survival mode, pretty soon you're in a place where everything is just bliss. And that's how I've been lately. Like, I feel like I've reversed aged, where I'm dressing younger than I used to. Like, I don't worry about my bills. Lately, I feel like I'm that bum or that friend that's unemployed on a random Tuesday. I don't know if you've seen that reel.
I have.
Yeah, where I literally don't worry about my rent or where I'm gonna eat or anything like that. And money just comes my way. Like, I literally have all my needs met. And I'm even going to take an opportunity where when you stop being in survival mode, you can actually let yourself dream and follow the things that actually makes your heart happy. And so I'm so grateful to be in that position now.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful for you to even share your experience, because one of the things that I told you since the beginning is I'm so glad that you're doing what makes you happy. Because one, like, it's such a privilege in I want to use this word again, but it's such a blessing to be able to go back to your home country and be able to do that. But most importantly, like, you're showing Yasmin, your daughter, like, what's possible. Because I think that, you know, I can only talk about my experience, but my parents, like, if it was the other way around and I told them, like, you know, why don't you go after your dreams, or why don't you try this? Like, to them, it was like I was talking Chinese or something. Like, they couldn't imagine that, you know, just because, like you said, like, some routines or just some behavior or just some things is so ingrained in you that for them it's kind of difficult or kind of challenging for them to even think that there could be like another way or another path. So that's something that I've told you that I love about you, and I respected you since the beginning. Is that you're always following like your gut and your intuition. And I think, you know, it's also like you're an example to like other women, especially other Latinas, that you can do whatever you want with your life. Like, at the end of the day, there is no right or wrong path. Like, you literally just figure it out as you go. And I know, like, I mean, are we the same age? I feel like I'm a little bit older.
Yeah, I'm 23.
Well, you're 23. I'm 27. So, I mean, that's a 5-year gap. But still, like, I love that you're doing everything that, what is the word? Makes you happy, but also like you're following your intuition. Because I think for me, like, that was really difficult from a young age, and that's why I'm like clapping for you, because I'm like, I don't think I could have ever done that, especially at 23. Like, that's scary, you know, to move across to another country. But again, it's a huge, like, a mindset thing.
Yeah, and while we're on that, it reminded me of a phrase that stuck out to me while I was going through that process of getting out of the survival mode, is you make different decisions when you're no longer in survival mode.
That's so important.
Part of me being in that survival mode, like, you really have to question the why of your decisions and everything you do, because when you're no longer in survival mode, you start making those different decisions where, for example, if somebody's in survival mode because of financial reasons, they're gonna stay in that secure job because they think, oh, I need this job because I need to make ends meet, I need to pay for the money, versus somebody that's not in that survival mode, that is just trusting that everything is going to work out for them, just gets up and leaves that job because they know they'll be okay. And it sounds so crazy, but in reality, it has to be like realistic and also so crazy at the same time, because you're realistic by saying, okay, maybe I do need finances, so I'm not going to leave this job right now. But when you're getting out of that survival mode, you start aspiring for greater things that seem maybe unachievable, but you start thinking, if I want to get from point A to point B, which is have a job that's way more flexible, even as crazy as it may seem, and you start thinking about it all the time, thinking about it, and it brings you so much happiness, then pretty soon you're gonna start finding opportunities that align with it. So you don't necessarily have to be delusional and burn the ships or whatever, but when you're no longer in that survival mode is when you start making those different decisions.
And I want to touch on that really quick before we forget, because I think you touched on a really good point, is that we do make different decisions when you're not in survival mode anymore. Because I've shared my story with you before, how I was making some really bad choices, y'all, at 21, 22, that, I mean, it's not funny looking back, but I mean, I could have ended up dead. Like, I could have ended up not here the next day. And it goes back to, even like as I get older, like I try to control everything, but it just goes back to like, no matter how much you try to control things are always going to play out the way that they're supposed to. And I think that's something really hard for people to understand and grasp, because not that we want to play God, but we just want to control things. Like, because we feel like if we're not in control, you know, something is going to happen. It's like that fear of like, well, what if this happens or what if that happens? But something I have just learned in my 27 years of life, and just rewiring my brain after just so many things that I was ingrained as a child, is that it's true. Like, you really can, this is our life, and we can shape it, and we can create it however way we want to possible. And I think one of the things that you touched on that was really interesting that you said was that sometimes we put ourselves in survival mode. And I think that I agree with that to a certain extent, because that is true. Sometimes you don't realize how you're the own cause of why you're stressing out. Like, you're the own cause of why you're in that situation. And at the end of the day, the only person that you can blame is yourself. But at the same time, and going back to that, it's like something my boyfriend said like a couple months ago was, we're really playing GTA with our life. And it's so true. It's like a video game, and like we're in a video game, and we get to control, you know, where we go, what kind of outfit we put on, you know, everything is in our control. But it's with what you believe in your mind. And so if you physically and you mentally, or you and your soul don't think that something can become real, then it's never going to become real, because in your head you're already doubting yourself before it becomes real. So I love your mentality of how, like, you know, you're saying that you're so detached from these jobs, which I think is a beautiful thing to have, because I don't want to take it lightly that I understand that sometimes some of our family, or like even I would say just like other generations, they had to have a job in order to put food on the table, which is totally valid. But I think nowadays, going back to your point, is that we have choices for a reason. So it's like, if we want to walk away from that job, we can, and we will be okay. You know, it's just about not limiting yourself in your mind. And
I want to unpack something so good that you touched on, because I feel like it's going to be such a good topic. You said you agreed with, you put yourself in that survival mode to an extent.
Yeah.
So what's the reason you don't agree with that? What's the part of it that you don't?
I think that, and this is just me looking at maybe not necessarily myself, but just past generations in my family, is that it goes back to, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? So even for like my ancestors, or like my family from generations a while ago,